Despite President Trump's announcement on Friday that he is considering winding down military operations against Iran, the war appears far from over. Instead, Trump has issued an ultimatum saying the U.S. will hit and obliterate Iran's power plants if Tehran fails to reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours. This as Iranian missile strikes have hit two southern Israeli towns located near a major nuclear research center, injuring dozens. Joining us now is Jack Cunningham, an international relations professor at the University of Toronto, to unpack these latest developments and where NATO stands in all this, as the war clearly shows no signs of stopping. Thanks so much for joining us today, Professor.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
So, beginning with the latest developments, these two southern Israeli towns hit, and it was near a primary nuclear facility that, the Iranian missile strikes were targeting, injuring dozens. Now, this comes a day after Iran accused the U.S. and Israel of attacking its nuclear facility as well. So, to you, does the shift toward targeting each other's nuclear sites signal a point of no return for the regional escalation?
Well, it certainly is a point of escalation. Dimona is essentially the hub of Israel's undeclared nuclear weapons program. And targeting it does represent a significant shift in Iranian tactics. I'm not sure we're any further along towards a point of no return than we were before. Odds of getting out of this weren't great. It's hard to see that many off ramps even before this happening.
Okay. And what is your assessment of President Trump's latest threat that the U.S. will obliterate Iran's power plants if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened within 48 hours? Does it display a leader who is in full control of the situation, or does it perhaps signal frustration and weakness as, the vital passage is still blocked, leading to a deepening global energy crisis?
I think it signals desperation on Trump's part. He has threatened to take out Iran's power system, but Tehran has responded by threatening further damage to energy infrastructure in the Gulf region that would prolong the economic impact of the conflict, that would do more damage, that would spook the markets even further. And he is clearly frustrated. He went into this war thinking that it would be over in a few days. It would be essentially a rerun of Venezuela. That hasn't happened. Clearing the Strait of Hormuz is actually very difficult unless you're going to go in with ground troops, because you have Iran's southern coastline running along the strait for a little more than 100 miles. You're not going to provide stability in the strait just with naval and air power. And escalating to a ground presence is something I think Trump is reluctant to do. He's probably wise not to rule it out, at least publicly, but I suspect he's very reluctant to go down that road. And if he did, it would be very much contrary to his own instincts.
Okay, and let's talk about President Trump's messaging before all this. He claimed to be winding down the military operation against Iran, while at the same time he deployed an additional 2,500 Marines to the region. And he's also rejecting a ceasefire. So is this a realistic approach to calm the Middle East, or does it deepen the crisis?
I think it indicates that Trump is unsure as to his own objectives in the war. He keeps vacillating from declaring pretty much complete victory to threatening escalation because things are not going well. I suspect he is, as he usually is, speaking without filters. He is frustrated. It's unclear that he has any coherent strategy in mind. I suspect he is looking for some sort of an off ramp, and if he had conditions that allowed him to basically declare victory and wind down operations, I suspect he would take that opportunity. But as things stand, it would be hard for him to wind hostilities down without a degree of embarrassment, without a degree of humiliation. And for somebody who's driven as much by ego as Trump is, that's simply intolerable.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about NATO. Trump has slammed NATO allies, calling them cowards for not sending their warships to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So given the severe impact on global energy markets and even skyrocketing oil prices, do you expect NATO countries to eventually join the fight? Or has Trump's rhetoric perhaps permanently fractured the alliance? Are you seeing any cracks?
Well, the economic consequences mean there may very well be a lot of domestic pressure on some NATO members to participate. But on the other hand, Trump's denigration of NATO, denigration of all American allies since coming back to the White House, means that it's politically very difficult for any allied leader to participate. Trump has become politically toxic in any allied country you could care to name. Now, you have seen efforts to be helpful, but within very strict limits. For example, the UK a couple of days ago gave permission for its bases at Diego Garcia and at Fairford to be used for strikes solely against Iranian systems targeting shipping in the Straits of Hormuz. But Iran has retaliated by launching a surprisingly long-range missile at the Diego Garcia base. So that's a signal to any NATO members that if they do try to participate, they do so at risk of retaliation. Everybody says, well, we'd like to help clear the Strait of Hormuz, separating that from the wider conflict. You can't really do that. The two are hopelessly intermixed. So it's hard to see any effort to have a very limited involvement proceeding. It's like trying to be half pregnant. It's not going to be plausible.
Last question, in speaking on Iran's strategy. So as for the Strait of Hormuz, Iran claims the vital waterway will be open to all shipping except vessels, of course, linked to Iran's enemies. So what do you make of this strategy? And does this selective blockade effectively perhaps neutralize U.S. efforts to building an international coalition? And how does it further complicate the U.S. military's mission to clear the waterway?
Well, this is a classic example of what's called asymmetric warfare. Iran is inferior to the United States and Israel in pretty much any category of conventional weaponry. What it does have is the economic leverage it can apply by obstructing shipping and the political difficulty that can cause Trump and anyone inclined to support him. While it's unlikely that there will be any widespread and effective international cooperation to clear the strait, everybody wants it to happen, but nobody has a blueprint for doing so. This is very much terrain that favors Iran. It's quite easy to obstruct the strait with mines, with shore-based systems. It's very hard to ensure the sort of stability that would be required to bring energy prices down, to bring the risk insurance premium down. And until you've got sustained and obvious stability in the strait, the energy prices are going to remain high, the stock market is going to remain spooked, and the political costs to the U.S. of persisting in the war will remain very high.
All right. Thanks so much for your time and insight today, Professor Cunningham.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
All right, that was Professor Jack Cunningham, an international relations professor at the University of Toronto.